Well, as you stop and think, this time of the year is, what do we usually kind of work on? We're always wanting to work on something new for our life. We're kind of working out some kind of resolution for our life and things maybe that we kind of saw ourselves struggling with a little bit in the past year and need improvement. We make our resolutions, and unfortunately, uh, most of the time they get broken pretty quickly, but it doesn't mean we give up on them. We kind of work through those things and we push through those things, and we get to a point in our life where sometimes, we realize that, hey, you know what I think I need today? I just need a clean start. I, I think too often I wake up every morning, unfortunately, thinking that, you know what, today I needed a clean start because there's something that I messed up on yesterday. There's something I didn't get to do in 100% of what I wanted to get to. And, I think of some times in my life where, I thought about struggling with things and fighting with things, but those clean starts are amazing things. We were singing about God's amazing love, and that's the kind of love He has for us. It's a love that it looks beyond, it hopes for more, and it wants to draw you in that direction, and that's what He has for us. No matter how, and I know this is going to sound tough today, but just bear with me because we think about it, sin tends to creep in our life and it dirties us up. Okay? And I know we don't like to hear that from them. I don't like to hear it said to me. And I know you don't like to hear it, but it's a fact. Sin dirties us up. And I think at times in my life, and, just thinking about dirtiness, I was thinking back when I was, I know this is going to sound crazy, and I hope you never find yourself in a position like this, but back, some of you who've been in the military, there's times when you're going to go days upon days without a shower because there's nothing available. And when I was going through my training, they put us into 2 weeks into the field. And it was November. It was freezing cold. We were in South Carolina, and it was cold. And I remember us trying to dig those foxholes, and the ground was hard. And we went a whole week before they offered us a shower. But by that point, you think about it, a week without a shower, really? Well, I'll just tell you, after that long, you don't even notice it anymore. It is what it is. You don't notice the smell. Everybody smells the same, so you basically become immune to it. Not something I want to become immune to too often. The smell of your body odor and being stuck in a foxhole and dirt and nasty. And finally, they offered us a shower, but everybody was so tired, and it was 3 o'clock in the morning. They said, hey, we've arranged for you to be able to go take showers, and it's freezing cold outside. And we're like, look, it's been a week. We got a week to go. Let's just push on through it. And you don't realize till you get back and you start taking off some of those uniforms and they nearly stand up by themselves. Set that stuff aside and you go I went take a shower, and when I walked back over to that clothes to pick it up to go wash it, and that smell hit me, and I was like, whoo, did I really smell like that for 2 weeks? So there's some times in our life where we get into positions where I didn't want to be in that position, but it was what it was at the time. But fortunately, I got cleaned up, and everything went back to normal. And I promise you, nowadays, because of that experience, if I don't take a shower every day, if not 2 a day, when you experience things like that. But let's all face it, there are times in our life when we can reach great accomplishments. We can reach all kind of achievements in our life, have all kind of awards given to us. We can have all kind of honor and prestige that goes along with doing different things, certain jobs, certain positions, and certain things. And yet, as a Christian, we can kind of deviate from the plan that God has for our life because of a couple of different reasons. One of them being that sin tends to creep in our life. Not that we pursue it. At least I hope that's not the case, because as a Christian, we are supposed to head in the other direction, but sometimes it creeps into our life, and it dirties us up, and it prevents us from being what God truly wants us to be. Now, sometimes that sin is visible, and people can see it, and sometimes it's not visible. We tend to do a pretty good job of hiding it and concealing it from people. And a lot of times that's where the greatest danger is, because if we have sin in our life that people can see, hopefully you have a good enough Christian friend that's going to come alongside and say, hey, Mike, that's probably not the best thing for you to be doing in your life right now. Does that kind of stuff hurt? Yeah, it probably hurts a little bit to hear it from somebody else. But if that person truly loves us, that's what they'll do for us. They'll come alongside us and say, you know what, hey, there's something in your life you need to clean up a little bit. There's something that you need to get a little bit better at. And how many people in the world do we know that are mighty in intellect and mighty in achievement, and yet they seem to have no peace to their soul? There's so much restless. They always feel like there's something not whole about their life. There's always something else they've got to be doing, and because their life doesn't seem complete. And too often, it's because of that sin in our life. It brings pain. Sometimes we need a healing. Sometimes it may be physical. Sometimes it may be emotional. And those things tend to kind of overwhelm us and take over our life. But you know what? Pain is a part of life. And sometimes you think about Jesus. Jesus faced people constantly who had pain in their life. He pursued those people who had pain in their life. You look at examples in Matthew alone. In Matthew chapter 8, Jesus heals the paralytic person. He heals the servant girl of the centurion. And then you move into chapter 9, and he's healing the blind people. He's healing the woman who's bleeding. He brings back to life the girl who had died. And all of these people that had pain in their life that he restored. He cleaned them up. He brought them back to the way that it was supposed to be. And we're going to be taking a look in 2 Kings today, chapter 5. We're going to look at an Old Testament character by the name of Naaman, who needed a clean start in his life. And let's just face it, there are a lot of things, though, that go on in our lives sometimes that can keep us from getting that clean and fresh start. And we're going to look at that. But when you look at the character of Naaman, that guy had a lot going on for him. He was the commander of the army of Syria. And you think back to this time frame, at that time, Syria was the powerhouse. They were the big dogs. They were the ones that were ruling everything. They had conquered all the major territories they were to conquer. They had everything going for them. And so here, Naaman was commander of the armies. He was the one who served the king. He had all of this stuff. He probably had power and prestige and his pride and all of these things going on for him. But yet, he needed something. He needed a healing. He needed to be cleaned up a little bit. Back, we're going to look at him because Naaman, we'll look at that a little bit further. His problem was he was a leper. Now, it probably was not a serious case of it, because if he had been a serious case of it, he would have been rejected by society. He would not have been able to be in the position he was in. But what took place in his life here in this instance, this healing that he needed would be one that would change his life forever. That cleaning up in his life that was going to take place was going to transform his life, and it was never going to be the same as it was before. And as we take a look at this, we'll see that Naaman wanted that healing and that cleaning to happen a certain way, but God had a different plan for that. And sometimes God's ways are not our ways, but if we just seek him out and we be patient and be open to what he has in store, amazing things that can happen that will change our lives forever, and we'll get that clean start in our life that we truly need. But as we look at this, we'll see that there was a couple of things that were going on in Naaman's life. And the first thing was there were some things that was preventing him, or what were the circumstances that followed this that he needed in his life. And the first thing was Naaman's pride. And I just mentioned to you that he was the commander of the army. And you think about that, basically, he was probably kind of like the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that we would see here in the United States. He was the top guy of all the commanders of the army. He was the guy that everybody turned to for the final decision on what they were going to do when it came to military matters. So with that, people knew who he was. The king knew who he was. I mean, we'll take a look. Let me go ahead and get in. We're going to read the scripture here in verses 1 through 15. 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 15. And it says, Naaman, commander of the armies of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master and high in favor because by him the Lord had given victory to Syria. He was a mighty man of valor, but he was a leper. Now the Syrians on one of their raids had carried off a little girl from the land of Israel, and she worked in the service of Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "Would that my lord were with the prophet who is in Samaria. He would cure him of his leprosy." So Naaman went in and told his lord thus, and so spoke the girl from the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, "Go now, and I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So he went, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 16,000 shekels of gold, and 10 changes of clothing. And he brought the letter to the king of Israel, who read, "When the letter reaches you, know that I have sent to you Naaman my servant, that you may cure him of his leprosy." And when the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to kill and to make alive, that this man sends word to cure a man of his leprosy? Only consider and see how he is seeking a quarrel with me." But when Elijah, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had tore his clothes, he sent to the king, saying, "Why have you tore your clothes? Let him come to me, that he may know that there is a prophet in Israel." So Naaman came with his horses and chariots and stood at the door of Elijah's house. And Elijah sent his messenger to him, saying, "Go and wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean." And Naaman was angry. He went away saying, "Behold, I thought that he would surely have come out to me and stand and call upon the name of the Lord his God and wave his hand over the place and cure the leper. Are not Abana and Parfor, the rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? Could I not have washed in them and be clean?" So he turned away and went in rage. But the servants came near and said to him, "My father, it is a great word the prophet has spoken to you. Will you not do it? He has actually said to you, 'Wash and be clean.'" So he went down and dipped himself 7 times in the Jordan, according to the word of the man of God, and his flesh was restored. And the flesh of flesh was restored like a little child. He was clean. Then he returned to the man of God and all his company, and he came and stood before him, and he said, "Behold, I know that there is no God in all the earth but Israel. So accept now my presence from your servant." So you think about Naaman, and you think about what's going on in his life, and as powerful as he was, as much prestige as he was, he had some things going on in his life that was probably going to interfere with what God wanted to do in his life. Now, I picked the word pride because it could have been his position, but let's just face it. There's a lot of us who don't achieve high positions that have pride in our life that stops us from accomplishing things. And that's why I wanted to kind of focus in on this, because a lot of the problem that had going on was the pride that came from his position. And Naaman here, being the one in charge, being the top guy, he was a likely candidate for the who's who of that nation at that time. He was going to be very, very high, and it was a chance that that title, that position was going to carry him a long ways and take him to things, because he was rubbing elbows with the elite, hanging out with the upper crust of the people there, and he was basically the cream of the crop. He couldn't ask for much better as far as a title and a position and the things that he had going for him as his life. But the Bible says that Naaman, commander of the army of Syria, was a great man in his master's sight, highly regarded because of him. And the Lord gave victory to Syria. He was a man of valor. You think about those descriptions that we just heard. Wouldn't we all love for someone to give a description of us in that way? A person of valor, mighty, a commander, highly regarded. All of those things to be mentioned about us would be a great asset to have about us. But one of the dangers for that is often when those types of things get spoken to us too often, we allow those things to go to our head, and that becomes what's most important from us, because we want to hear a word from people rather than hear a word from God. Those things can become a stumbling block for us, because even though he had his power and his position, he had his success, he probably had a really nice house, he had a lot of money. All of those things were okay, and he was envied because of those things. But all of those things were a distraction to what he truly needed in his life. They were getting in the way for God to do a mighty cleansing in his life. All of those things were a stumbling block to him. And they can be to us all, because our pride tends to take over. And we don't want to listen to what God wants to do, to the cleaning, to the fresh, clean start that he wants to give us. Like I said, every single day if we ask for it, he wants to help us start anew. Because God doesn't just call us and then abandon us. He stays with us. He wants to be a part of our life. He wants to see us getting through those things. And all of those things, just like in Naaman's life, can become a stumbling block to what God wanted to do for him. Those same things can happen to us if we listen to the whispers of people too often, rather than listening to God's voice, calling us in directions that we need to go and calling us away from other things in our life that are causing us to be hindered to his will and to his purpose. But not only was Naaman's pride a problem, he had another big problem. His problem, as he moved forward, and we look at this, when we're reading these scriptures, there's one little word that changes everything. Too often when we hear and I think Pastor Tim was talking about this a little while back, when we hear the word "and," we like that because it usually insinuates there's something more, there's something extra, there's something more to something. But when we hear the word and someone's speaking in a sentence and they say "but," a lot of times there's a drastic change from what was just said. And in the verses right there, in verse 2, when it talked about him being a mighty man of valor, it says, but he was a leper. Naaman had a problem. Every time he looked at his reflection, and obviously he was probably doing a pretty good job of hiding this, but probably when he was in his tent or his house or wherever he was at the time, and he looked in the mirror, he looked in a reflection of the water when he was by himself, he saw this reflection of this sickness in his life. This leprosy that was slowly beginning to eat away at his flesh. And when we read in some of this, there's some of the commentators that refer to the leprosy actually being sin and how sin can eat away at our own flesh. And that's very true. But what I want you to see here is that the leprosy was a problem in his life. And he knew it was a problem in his life because all of that prestige, all of that power, all of that wealth in time was going to mean nothing because he was going to become an outcast. People were going to begin to shun him and send them away from his place because he was, and you think about it, the Israelites, if you had leprosy, you were considered unclean. You were not able to even go worship at the temple because you were unclean. You were supposed to be totally separate from everyone. And the crazy thing is, you're a person in need of a touch, in need of a cleaning, and yet no one wants to do anything with you. We can all find ourselves in that kind of a position sometime when we allow those problems in our life and we think about sin, and I know that the sin word is a tough thing for us to wrestle with, but when sin has creeped into our life and has dirtied us up, too many times people don't even have to cast us away. We find ourselves leaving the presence of other people because we're more concerned about what people think of us than getting a fresh cleaning from God and starting afresh and starting new in our lives. But he was eventually going to become an outcast, but still, this was not his greatest problem. As we read this story, we see Naaman, and he takes this long journey, and he goes to the house. He goes to the king, and the king at Israel's first, he's like, what do you want me to do for you? I can't do anything for you. Your king is just trying to pick a fight. And he's not thinking, hey, there's a guy in your own kingdom that can take care of this matter. Well, then finally, Elijah says, come over, send him over to me. And here's Naaman, this highly regarded man, this man of great honor and valor and position, and he rides up to Elijah's house, and what does Elijah do? He doesn't even come out to greet him. He sends out his servant, and he says, hey, go tell him something. Well, what does Naaman do? He gets mad. He gets raged. God is sending this servant out to tell him what to do, and he gets mad because he says, you know what? I'm a man of great honor. I'm a man of great pride. This is a third-rate nation that I've come to, people who are beneath me, and you can't even send out the guy who's most important to talk to me. He allows his pride to get in the way, and he begins to rage within himself. And that becomes a problem within his life. Now, if we look at this story, who knows why Elijah himself didn't come out to him? Maybe Elijah, being an Israelite, didn't want to come into contact with a leper because that's what they were commanded not to do. Maybe Elijah, just being a person who had the power to healing, and we think about doctors, maybe he didn't have good bedside manner. He was just like, hey, go out there and tell this guy what to do, okay? But maybe it was a test of Naaman's faith. Maybe he says, you know what, I'm going to see how bad he wants this. How bad he wants this cleaning from God. And I'm going to send out this simple servant, this messenger, to tell him what to do and see how he reacts. And what does he do? He gets mad. He wants to storm off and leave and run away from the thing that he needed the most to get clean. He was going to allow his anger to be a problem that was going to interfere with what God wanted to do in his life. And we too, just like Naaman, too often in our life, we can have some problems in our life. We can have some sickness in our life. We can have some sin in our life, and we allow our anger to keep us from going to where we want to go because we're not hearing the answer that we want from God. That we think God is not meeting us personally, but if he sends someone to talk to us, is that not God being personal with us? If God gives us a vision of something that needs to take place in our life, is that not God speaking to us about what he wants for our life? It is. But we too need to be careful that we're not getting good at covering up and hiding things in our life and preventing us from getting a fresh and clean start that we truly need and that we truly want. But just because we don't hear from God in the exact way that we want to hear from God, we storm off and we prevent God from moving in our life. Because even though Naaman had his pride, and even though he had the problem of not wanting to seek God, and everything wasn't lining up in the right way, and that he was a leper and he was eventually going to be outcasted and be out of the way, the thing that he truly needed was God's providence. And we think about what is providence? Providence is simply divine guidance and care for us. And God was showing up with that. God was providing that providence through a little slave girl who at one time they had conquered and captured. And this little girl goes to Naaman's wife and says, I know where he needs to go for healing. God was trying to use this simple little girl who was in a place she didn't want to be in to help her own masters. And you think about other leaders in the Bible. Daniel was one of those who helped his captors, the people who had captured him. He was trying to help his own people. Mordecai did that. Ezra did that. Nehemiah. So many of these exiles, just like she was an exile, was trying to help those who had conquered her because she was trying to care for their physical and spiritual needs. And this little girl was doing that. God was trying to show his providence for him through the willingness of a king. When he went to the king and says, look, I got this problem, and this girl has given me an answer, the king says, not only go, but he says, look, take all this stuff with you. Take this gold, take this silver, take all this clothing, and offer it as a gift, and hopefully they'll give you what you need. Not realizing that that's not what God wanted. He didn't want all of those things. He just wanted Naaman's faith. He wanted him to be faithful. But God used that prophet, Elijah, to direct him. And God can use even his simple servants who, after he stormed off, his servants went up to him and said, Master, why are you not listening to these directions? Why are you going to go away from where you need to be? So even in the midst of his pride and his anger and everything, fortunately, he listened to his servants. And he turned around and he went back to the Jordan who he had just said was a dirty river, because he says, aren't there other rivers in Damascus that are much better than this, that I can go swimming in instead of this old nasty river? But when he goes back and he does what the prophet tells him, God gives him a clean start. And he starts from scratch. And I think about that. Why must we at times, just like Naaman, descent to lowness in our life before we allow God to act in our life? And I think we all kind of know the answer for that. I know it's been very true for my life, that it's been unfortunate that there's times where I have to get to the lowest point in my life before God can show up and act and lift me up. Not that he can't act before, but I'm too busy and I'm too stuck on me. I'm too stuck on my pride. I'm too angry about things that are going on in my life before God can take me to new heights and he can give me that clean start that I wanted. But that answer that we see, it's in the New Testament in 1 Peter 5, 5 through 6, when we think about, it says, all of you clothe yourselves with humility toward one another, because God resists the pride and gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, under the mighty God, and he may exalt you in due time. Sometime we have to scrape bottom before we can start up. Sometimes we have to face death before we can truly see life. Sometimes we have to taste pain before we can experience joy. And sometimes we have to humble ourselves to a low place, to lowly people, before God can show up and we can feel his hand moving in our life. His divine providence, his guidance, his care for us sometimes shows up in ways that we don't expect, that we don't look for. Sometimes it's maybe not the way we even want it to be, but it's there. We have to take hold of it. We have to not be willing to run away from it. We have to be humble. And Naaman was at that low point in his life. And just as before, when he finally goes down to that river and accepts that divine providence, that divine care and guidance, whereas before leprosy defined his life and was basically forecasting his future, all of a sudden now he had a fresh start. He had a clean start. He was going to be heading in a new direction for his life, for new things in his life. And it's obvious that took place. Because as we look to the end of verse 15, in verse 15 he says, then he returned to the man of God and all of his company, and he came and stood before him, and he said, behold, I know that there is no God in all the earth but in Israel. He, for the first time in his life, saw that there was one true God. Syria worshiped all these gods, all these foreign things, all of these other things, and even Israel himself, the country of Israel itself, had fallen so far into idolatry, in other words, worshiping everything else except for God, that God allowed them to be conquered. Because even though Israel had a king in place, it was basically a vassal king. They were a conquered nation that the Syrians had allowed a king to stay in place. But they were not in charge. Syria was the one in charge. But Naaman, for the first time in his life, realized that there was a higher power, one true higher power, higher than the king of Syria, higher than the king of Israel, who could do nothing and tore his clothes, but that there was a one true God who not only wanted to give him a clean start, but did when he finally followed those instructions, when he finally followed the things that God wanted to do. And all of a sudden, he was a man with a clean start, with a new start, and hopefully going to have a new spiritual life. And no telling what that was going to lead to for the things of his life. So as we think about these things, as we think about 2014 that lies ahead of us, and the excitement that comes with a fresh, clean start to things, and I often wonder, I don't know why we look at January 1st as a clean start, but we do. You know, it's kind of like a rethinking of things and a collecting of where do we want to be, where did we go wrong. When we need to be looking at sometimes not only where do we want to be, but what we need to get away from. Are there some things in our life that's keeping God from giving us a true fresh start? And I don't get me wrong, I'm one of those who's just as guilty. Most of the time, the fresh start that I think I need is eating better every year. And there are better things for me than just that. And yeah, that's a start on things. But let's be honest, there are other things in my life that I probably need to improve on. And I know we want to think of us as ministers as supposed to be the guy who's got it all together spiritually. But you know what? We struggle with things. We have things we have to overcome. There's things sometimes when we have to rearrange things and refocus things in our life because we get caught up in the everyday life. And sometimes we allow our pride to get in the way. Sometimes I know I have other problems in my life that can become a distraction. And we all know that we face things in our life. I've shared with some of the teens in the youth group and other folks that anger is a big problem for many of us. I know I struggled with that for a long time, and it was a big distraction in my life for where God wanted me to go. And what anger does to us is it forces us to react rather than to respond, and that's not healthy for us. Because when we react, too often it's our emotions driving us. And when we respond to things, it's because we've thought about what's best for us. So as we think and as we close out this service, what do we need to do? I know there's some things, guys, that I've had to think about today. What do I need to do in my life to help me be focused on the clean start that God wants me to have? The clean start that he wants to give me today and every day, fortunately, because he is such a loving and amazing God. We're going to open up the altar here in a moment. Don't let pride get in the way. Don't let problems get in the way of what God wants to do for you today. Sometimes, and I know for me, and I was very guilty of this for a long time, that I would never approach this altar up here, even to get on my knee and pray, because my pride was like, what are other people going to think? Don't let that be today. Don't let that be every day. Allow God to move in your life, and that forces us to humble ourselves and submit ourselves to a God. And that means sometimes we have to get down on our knees and pray to God, because being on our knees is a symbol of submission to God. So as we do that today, I'm going to be up here. If you need me to pray with you about something, maybe there's something that you know is getting in the way for you getting that clean start, I'll pray with you. There'll be Jennifer will be up here. If you just need to come up and kneel, or if you're just wanting to stay where you're at, that's fine too. But don't let that stuff get in the way of getting a fresh, clean start today.